Hello YouTube, this is Neon. I'm going to entitle this Coping with Mental Illness, an Addendum. I'm going to be reviewing the last 6 videos of this series. I'm going to add a little bit of information that I think is particularly important, and then I'm going to make an appeal to my core group of subscribers and one other lady who's been watching this series on coping with mental illness consistently. So, a review. The tools that one uses to cope with mental illness or let me just say, coping with mental illness is complex. That the tools that we use change, they evolve. The way that we cope with mental illness evolves. Some of the skills that we use, we're going to take away. We'll no longer use them. Other skills we may discover if we make coping, along with personal growth, a daily endeavor. Okay? There are short-term as well as long-term coping methods. There's no one way to do these things. Again, I'm marking everything off as I'm reading and I'm talking to you beautiful people. I'm marking things off because it works better that way. All right. So I recommend reading as many personal growth books as possible on as many subjects as possible, and including that lay out and explain what mental illness is, particularly the type of mental illness an individual particularly may suffer, books on how to cope with that mental illness, and with the options for coping. Hopefully they'll have more than one, or you can read more than one book. Personality books, relationship books, financial books, whether it's saving money or making more money, or just books on your profession to add to your knowledge of your profession. Books on how to create your own dream and how to get a dream for your life. Books on meditation, books on spirituality. How do you pick a book? One speaker said, look at the titles that jump out at you. So what I would say is that's one way, because there's a million relationship books, and there's relating with your child, which would be like parenting. There's relationship books on relationships with your partner, with your boss, co-workers, strangers. With someone, for me, who has anthrophobia, the fear of people, reading on anthrophobia would be kind of like a relationship book, dealing largely with strangers. So the titles that jump out at you would be one way of doing it, since there are so many options. If you're afraid, you can go to the library. I found that somewhat limiting, because a lot of the books that are popular can be difficult to find at the library, but sometimes you can find some of the good ones. And some of the best ways of finding good books would be through word of mouth, through what people have recommended. Reading books on people who have achieved great things, particularly those who come from like middle class, working class, or poverty class, can serendipitously lead a person to find coping skills and success principles without it having to be scholastic and formal, the reading that they're doing, if they don't want to sit there and have to read formal types of books. That's one option. Reading the books on your favorite heroes and how they went from poverty to wealth. You can gather that, and it doesn't have to be wealth. It can be fame, it can be reading, it can be philanthropy, it can be reading about Gandhi, Reverend Dr. King, Mother Teresa, but it can also be reading about great capitalists and great movie stars. You choose, but you will serendipitously find skills. In so doing, I don't recommend a lot of TV for this, but before I began reading, I did watch a lot of documentaries on people who went kind of from rags to riches. Excuse me. Again, I have to drink my water to the side because the cup, I don't have a lot of cups, and the cup I use has a label. I don't know if that can be shown on YouTube or not. And watching these books of people who became famous and seeing all that they went through, some were homeless, some were broke, some went through bullying, really nasty bullying, I began to see my own tortured life, emotionally, psychologically, financially, as sort of the beginning of something great. Okay, particularly once I wrote down my dream for my life for the first time at age 22. That was over 20 years ago. So these are some suggestions for how to get personal growth books. Okay, there was a philosopher named Hippocrates. He's very well known for the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take. But he also discovered personality types. As the oracle from the Matrix said, know thyself. Each person has strengths and weakness based on their personality that they're born with. I first came across personality types through Briggs-Myers. And it gave me an inkling of my personality, that there are strengths and weaknesses that I was born with. It was helpful, but it wasn't until I read several books on personality types that it sort of became crystallized. As I began to do this series, it became more crystallized. Which in large part, which recently has helped me to accept some of my weaknesses. So if you look at a person who's taller than 6'6", or a person who's taller, or a person who's under, let's say, 4'9", the person who's over 6'6", they could beat themselves up for bumping their head all the time, right? The person who's under 4'9", they could beat themselves up for having to use ladder to reach things all the time. But the reality is that they're completely innocent. When you learn your personality type, you will know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You'll know what your limits are. You'll get an idea of how much you can expand those limits, but there's limits. There's limits. Just like the tall or the person who's under, who's not even 4'9", there's going to be limits to them, you know? Yet there's going to be ways in which they can cope. So knowing your personality type, I recommend reading books on the Briggs-Myers personality test. I do not recommend taking the easy route and taking the test, finding out what your personality is, and getting a little readout, and boom, you're done. Too easy. I've done that and it wasn't enough. It wasn't until I read several books that I began to crystallize. And even now, doing this series, it's like I've learned more just in mentally thinking about the books that I've read, where I don't have to beat myself up for not having tons of friends or for struggling with depression. Under the best of circumstances, my personality type would struggle with minor depression. Okay, so I've done that. Know that a person who struggles with mental health, it will be like they're carrying 200-pound weight. And each of these skills may only remove 1 pound of that weight. Other skills that I've practiced seem like they removed half the weight. But there's again, I know I'm beating a dead horse in a sense, but there's nothing that I found that removes all the weight permanently and makes life easy. That's the reason why I recommend people getting a dream for their life, and a big dream. You know, it doesn't have to be a billionaire, but it should be a big dream. Mother Teresa wasn't a billionaire, but she had a big dream. Because the bigger your dream, the higher the price you'll have to pay to achieve that dream. But as your dream takes on a life of its own, it will begin to give you skills to cope with your mental illness, to become that amazing person that you need to be to achieve that big dream. So when I judge my mental health, I don't judge it by the inside, I tend to judge it by the outside. I know that if I'm not bathing, if I'm not brushing and flossing, if I'm leaving dirty dishes, if I'm not cleaning my place, if I'm not leaving my room for more than a day at a time, I judge my mental health status based on that. Because if I judge it just based on my thoughts can be faulty, because I can sometimes believe things that are not real. So I judge my mental health status based on these outward things. Now again, personality, know thyself. Please take the time to get books on Briggs-Myers personality tests. Those are secular humanists. They would appeal to anybody. If you're a Christian and you're a conservative like I used to be, I now call myself a born-again believer. I do not consider myself a Christian, and I am progressive. I am not conservative anymore. But if that is you, Florence Latower I would recommend. Again, she is conservative and she is Christian, and there are some Bible verses in her stuff. But I only recommend her because she's the author that I read where it began to crystallize the personality test. All of these tests go back to Hippocrates, basically. Get to know yourself, okay? So, what else? I revisit my problems I find over and over again, and each time I revisit the same problems, I solve them just a little bit quicker. They affect me just a little bit less. It's frustrating to revisit the same problems, but it's a good thing to know that they don't have to repeat. Before I was reading and doing positive things every day, I would watch documentaries on people who became rich in the music industry. And again, serendipitously, I began to interpret my own suffering. I don't know if I said this already. If I did, forgive me. As my own suffering as something that there was a greater good that would come out at the end. Since so many of these great musicians went through so much suffering, you can almost name it, and some of these musicians have suffered it in one way or another. It was serendipitous. So this appeal goes out to Catherine Murdoch, Cognitive Burnout, my other subscriber who I can't see their name, and Shava Ayana, who has watched my videos regularly. Shava Ayana, you've been watching it from the beginning, so I love all of you. Y'all are a core group of people who followed my series, Coping with Mental Health. And I want you to know that I will have similar series in the future. I will also have some lighthearted stuff, because this is also a video log that's fun for me. But I ask you that if you don't want to watch some of the silly videos, please stay tuned, stay subscribed for some of my series that will be similar to Coping with Mental Health, that will help with personal growth. My next video is going to be on my favorite episode of Little House on the Prairie. That's going to be a lot of fun for me, and hopefully for you if you do decide to watch. I will then do a very out-of-date movie review for Fences, the Denzel Washington, Viola Davis movie that I watched Christmas of last year. I know I'm late, but I want to do a movie review because it's going to be fun. After that, I will be doing a series on compassionate listening that I suspect will have 4 parts, possibly more. Eventually, I will be doing a series on visualizing, receiving, and sending love, how that has affected me, how that has helped me, how I stumbled across it. Eventually, I will be doing a series, which may only be 1 or 2 parts, but could be more, on coping with incest. And of course, I will be doing the famous dream list, how to construct a dream for your life. So for you folks that found, for me it was a pleasant surprise that coping with mental illness was something that you wanted to follow. I didn't know that I was going to get people, this small core group of beautiful people that were going to follow that series. Know that other stuff will be coming out soon that's similar, but that some silly videos are going to be coming out, or lighthearted ones. If you like my video, please like, subscribe, share, comment commercials, recommend my videos. Do 1 or more of those things. Thank you and best wishes.